everybody. I would like to introduce our panel for this next event, named the Youth Therapeutic Court Program, regarding the general principles guiding the structure and implementation of some youth programs are discussed by an experienced legal practitioner. I do believe that is Miriam Henry, Crown Counsel for the Crown Law Office, Ministry Attorney General. Ms. Henry is an assistant Crown attorney who has dedicated her career to supporting better outcomes for justice-involved youth. She is one of the Ministry Attorney General's leading experts on youth criminal justice and has over 2 decades of prosecutorial experience, much of it as Crown team lead at 311 Jarvis. She is currently the Crown lead at the Toronto Northwest Justice Centre, where she was instrumental in envisioning and implementing a new and innovative community youth court premised on the co-location and integrated service delivery of justice, education, health, and social services in partnership with community. Her significant contributions to youth justice have been widely acknowledged, and she is a recipient of the Ontario Bar Association Criminal Award of Excellence for Innovation in Youth Criminal Justice, the Zenith Award for Women Advancing in Law, and the OCAA Rupert Ross Award for Excellence in and Commitment to Social Justice. We also have Mike Brooks, Senior Policy and Program Coordinator, Manager at Justice Centres, Ministry of the Attorney General. Mr. Brooks serves as Manager of Justice Centres at the Ontario Ministry of the Attorney General's Criminal Law Division. In his role, he works with partners from across sectors and provides expert advice on innovative crime rate reduction and criminal justice initiatives. Welcome.
Good morning. Thanks so much.
Good morning. We're just going to be sharing our screen, so just bear with us for a moment. While that's happening, I'll just indicate that we're very pleased to be here today. We are here to discuss the Toronto Northwest Justice Centre. The Justice Centre is a new court model in Ontario, and it is focused on youth at this time. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike to discuss the Toronto Northwest Justice Centre and justice centres in general.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Miriam. Okay, I think it makes sense to start with the basics. If you're not familiar with the Justice Centre model, it is actually not a new concept. It's actually a model that's in use in over 70 jurisdictions right around the world. It is driven by various levels of government and even police services in some instances. Really at its core, a Justice Centre, or you'll hear us call it a JC, combines 2 main ingredients. And the first ingredient are elements of a specialty court. So you can think of a adult therapeutic court, a drug treatment court, or a mental health court. That's ingredient 1, combined with elements of a community hub. So think of a space that co-locates various wraparound services, health, education, housing, the list goes on. Critically, justice centers are not diversion courts, and in fact, they can have an impact at multiple points in the criminal justice system. That can be pre-charge, post-charge, and even post-conviction as well. In Ontario, we've tuned that justice centre model so it makes sense in the communities that it's currently operating. And importantly, community itself remains at the heart of the design, development, and operation of all justice centres. This is really driven from the bottom up. As a provincial ministry in Ontario, part of our job is to help rally some of the resources and relationships inside of government, including the ministries of health, education, and social services as well. It really is a wraparound approach. When we began this work in Ontario, we knew it would be critical to develop a long-term vision for justice centres. And that's what you see on your screen right now. It's that building. We're not quite at this stage yet, but at full scale, justice centers serve 3 distinct populations, which are in the middle of the slide. The first population are individuals who have been charged by the police and are in need of assistance as they go through the court process. Another group are individuals who have come into contact with the police, but have not been charged. They're at the pre-charge stage. And then finally, in the middle there, you see we've illustrated community members. And those are individuals who have not come in contact with the criminal justice system, but indeed may still be in need of some help and supports. So here's a really concrete example. In this long-term vision, you can think of a building that has in the same space probation officers, a legal clinic to support landlord-tenant issues, as well as dedicated community case managers from community-based service providers that could help people complete high school diplomas, connect them with clinicians like social workers and psychiatrists, and do some harm reduction work as well. So that is kind of that's the place we'd like to get to here in Ontario. So what's happening right now? Well, right now, there are happily 4 justice centers that are up and running here in the province. There are 2 in Toronto. We'll be zoning in on the Toronto Northwest Justice Center today, but we also have one in the Downtown East community of Toronto, one in London, and then one in Kenora as well. And you'll see on the screen, each of them not only has a distinct focus population, but it actually is a unique expression of the Justice Center model itself. And again, driven by community. So briefly, in London, the Justice Center is focused on young adults aged 18 through 24 who are disconnected from school and work at the same time. They're looking to reconnect with those systems of support. In the Toronto Downtown East, the focus is on adult chronic offenders who are at the intersection of housing instability, homelessness, mental health challenges, and addictions challenges as well. And in Kenora, the focus is really on addressing the overrepresentation of Indigenous youth and young adults in the criminal justice system. And a huge part of that is working with Indigenous service providers, existing restorative justice programming, and Indigenous leadership as well. So each has a unique focus. We'll use the balance of our time today to zone in on the Toronto Northwest Justice Center and to walk us through some of the core elements of that particular JC. Miriam, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. The reason you're looking at this map right now is one of the things we want to highlight is that the Toronto Northwest Justice Center has a jurisdiction that's very, very large. There are 6 police divisions that feed into our Justice Center. And if you look at this map, it is north of Steeles, east of the DVP, west of the 427, and 22 Division goes all the way down to the lakefront. And so why is this important to consider? Because there are many, many communities within this large geographic range. And what we have done is take a look at who are the people in these communities. So you'll see on the next slide that what we did is do a deep dive to see what is the experience of the people and the many different communities in that large geographic path. And when we look, there's some things that we've learned. We've learned there are significant issues with community violence. And what we know about community violence is community violence leads to significant trauma. We know that in these particular neighborhoods, there is extreme gun violence, and gun violence not only traumatizes those who are directly involved, but the communities and where those bullets flew. One thing we know is that COVID did not impact this level of gun violence. That remained unabated. We took a look at who lives there, not just what are the dynamics in the communities, but who are there. And we know that it's varied. There's a high population of racialized people, people who identified as Black, new immigrants, people who have been in community for generations. But there are some very significant experiences in terms of systemic factors, in terms of inadequate housing, inadequate access to healthcare, to mental health supports, over-representation in criminal justice, over contact with the police, systemic factors of racism. And so when we look at that and we're trying to figure out how do we include, how do we address, how do we operationalize the YCJA? How do we take young people who have this background and try to change their circumstances? So we looked at the type of offenses they commit. We looked at the system itself and some of the structures in that system that might be barriers. So what we have done is we decided to create a court model that addresses the issues that the young person has. Not necessarily their charges, because the social factors around them often are part of the reason they're in conflict with the law. So in order to operationalize the YCJA, you need to understand who you're dealing with. Because if you're going to try to rehabilitate somebody and reintegrate somebody, you need to understand who you're dealing with. And what we know from our research is we have a high level of population who have lack of access to resources, while significant systemic trauma related to racism and other issues related to poverty. Every young person who comes into the Justice Center has a community counselor, has a case management counselor. And that counselor does an intake interview with them. And that interview was created through a joint effort of specialists in community, people with lived experience. We all came together and how do we best capture the experiences of the young people who come into conflict and who are in our Justice Center. And so there are a number of domains, and we look at things like, do you have an adult that you trust? Have you been a victim of violence? Because one of the things that we're trying to do is break the cycle of violence. So we find out what is happening in that young person's life, their education status, what's going on. And then we have two different things that happen. We have in-house supports where we have brought supports to young people that are part of the Justice Center. We have a dedicated psychiatrist. So if we have a young person who's in immediate crisis, we can instantly connect them with a psychiatrist. We can also have medication assessments, risk assessments, academic assessments. We also have a dedicated social worker who can do immediate counseling for young people if they've been flagged as of needing an immediate intervention. We also have an education advocate. That person is a lawyer who is assigned to kids who flag with education issues. We know in terms of preventing cycles of violence and improving outcomes for youth, education and maintaining your education is a key factor. We know that a lot of racialized youth are disconnected from their education. We know that a lot of youth who are in conflict with the law end up disconnected from their education. So that lawyer gets assigned to young people who flag with those concerns. And the beauty of this court model is that we have protected and preserved your right to trial, that you can assert your charter rights. You can determine that you want to have a trial and also access these services. So you can come into our court, have the caseworker do a full intake and access our services. That intake also, and the beauty is we've connected to pre-existing community organizations and services that have been in community for many, many years and supporting many different types of community members and different people from different cultural backgrounds and racial backgrounds, but they have never been part of the traditional referral pathways in criminal justice. And we have embedded them into our referral pathways. So a young person gets an individual plan that will include accessing our in-house supports and referrals to community partners who can help with other identified issues. That young person can then take that plan and go and have a trial, and yet still access those resources. Or that young person can stay in the Justice Center and be case managed by our dedicated judges and be supported throughout the process while they work through their plan. We look at trying to prevent people from having to be in the system in terms of a probation order if it's not necessary, and we can upfront the work that would otherwise be done on a probation. We do that. We're very mindful to do things quickly. We know that young people should not be before the courts and going in and out of a courtroom constantly is not good for identity. So we try to rapidly have the criminal matter dealt with, but the supports the young people have and the plans and the referrals in community, those remain because the issues we identify remain longer than the charges. And we want to make sure that those people are continuing to be supported so that they don't come back into criminal justice. One of the ways we do this is that we also provide referrals for the family. You can't help a young person if the whole family's in crisis. You have to help the whole family as well. If a young person is going to resolve at the Justice Center and there's not going to be a trial, then we reach out to youthful victims who've been a victim of violence and to provide them with the supports they need so that they don't then become an accused and come into the criminal justice system. So part of our process is about identifying who the young person is and what their needs are, and then addressing those needs with rapid intervention and supports. We recognize that there are a number of issues that our young people deal with. We have also gone to help develop the Mary Donne program, which is a specific program for Black youth and Black identity, looking at issues of identity and self-esteem. We recognize that there were some gaps in service for community members, and we were trying to fill those gaps. So every young person leaves the Justice Center with an aftercare plan. And if they are found guilty by the court, we build in a sentence review, because we're looking at record retention issues, and we want to review that sentence again and offer supports for young people if need be. Moving on to the next slide, what we've done is we have embedded this in communities. So we have the Toronto Police in agreement with the police that when they arrest a young person, they release them directly to one of two locations. One of them is at 1126 Finch Avenue West, where there are service providers at that location known as Luminous, and there are many different mental health and addiction service providers there, or they're released to 21 Panorama Court, again, with all sorts of service providers there. So they can access court through a video suite, have their case manager meet them there, and then after court access services. What you see in the middle is that all of those judicial actors, the judge, everybody else is remote. Our long-term vision is a dedicated space that Mike was talking about, where we bring in all of the supports to young people so that they can come into the Justice Center and immediately access supports so that they can quickly obtain the services that they need to address the factors that brought them into criminal justice. And moving on to the last slide, I'll turn this over to Mike in terms of our outcomes.
Yeah, so we've been up and running for nearly 2 years now, not quite. It's a little bit early for a really robust recidivism analysis, but that doesn't mean we have some, we don't have any good feedback to share. We do have an evaluation structure in place for all of the Justice Centers in Ontario, and it does focus on quantitative and qualitative measures. I'll start with the quantitative, and that's at the bottom of the slide. We're really proud that every single participant that comes into the Justice Center receives some type of support that's been informed by the intake interview and really navigated by that case management role that we spoke about. Everybody gets something, nobody is missed. And it really is an understatement to say that it's just a case management team, because really there's a broad range of service providers, in fact, over 50, to which we have referral pathways. And those agencies are focused on health, education, employment, family services. The list is very, very long. Many of those service providers in that list of 50 are multi-service providers, meaning you can go to them, to one agency, and receive a range of supports under one roof. And finally, we're really proud of the final data point you see, that final bullet. Over half of the young people that have an identified education need leave the Justice Center after their court matter has concluded, having moved the needle on their education need. That is a really, really hard thing to do. Often getting someone re-enrolled in school or dealing with an expulsion or an exclusion is not something that happens overnight. So Justice Centers exist in this middle ground of trying to move people efficiently and responsibly through the court process, and at the same time, giving them enough support so they can make those big changes. And really we're really proud of that final bullet. And it really is all toward that dedicated education advocate who's a trained lawyer, but has a very niche focused practice on the Education Act and helps people get to where they need to be. We also have some qualitative feedback as well, and that's in the middle of your screen. These are just two examples, but we've received some feedback from defense counsel who are bringing multiple clients to the Justice Center, participants themselves, but other family members, brothers, sisters, moms, and dads, and of course, service providers that are seeing these young people outside the confines of the justice system. So just a bit of a sampling there as well. We really hope that we get to report back later when we have some more robust quantitative information. Hopefully on the justice side, we're a little bit shy of that line quite yet. Miriam, anything to add to the outcomes side?
The only thing I would add is that we're always improving. This is a process that's ongoing, because every time we get feedback and we tweak what we're doing. If there is anybody listening to this presentation whose work overlaps with what we do, and you see that there's an intersection, please reach out to us. We would be very happy to meet with you and discuss. We're always looking to broaden our referral pathways. We're always looking to partner with other organizations, because part of what we need to do is link all the different organizations, ministries, everybody who's working essentially with the same populations, and bring our resources together for comprehensive approach to young people. And so the Justice Center is something that does that. And if there's any of you out there that can see that your work intersects with ours, please reach out to us. We would be more than interested in hearing what you're doing and seeing if we can embed the work of other professionals in what we're doing.
I'd like to.
A moment or two for questions.
I just have one question that's in the chat. Is there a YMHCW involved in the JC team? Is that the social worker you mentioned?
We have a number of social workers. We have 2 that are case management intake. We also work with Psych Media, which is our psychiatrist, and he hires also psychologists and social workers that work with him. So we actually have a number of different social workers in the Justice Center in different ways.
Thank you.
Mr. Brooks and Ms. Henry, I'd like to thank you very much for a very holistic and a bit of a breath of fresh air, all of the areas that you cover, including your success in noticing people flourishing through education. It was huge for my own healing. It is a step in the right direction that we just love to take in healing, and I thank you for the work that you're doing. You're talking about aftercare plans. That's huge because transitions are critical. And your justice centers are a beautiful picture. And I love the ideas. Thank you very much for coming today. We're going to move on now to the Toronto Mental Health Court. Oh, sorry.
Hi. Sorry, I just had one question that came in again, just to the panel. What is the role of the Youth Mental Health Court worker?
The youth mental health court worker is in the traditional courts. We have our own in-house staff, as we've talked about, but the court workers are still play a vital role assisting young people who are in the traditional court. But we have, as you've heard, our own in-house specialists that can assist young people and assist them when they are appearing in mental health court, in the traditional court, in terms of providing any background materials or assessments that could help any mental health worker trying to advocate for their client. So we do intersect because, of course, we're dealing with the same population, and we don't keep all of our cases. Some of those kids want to have trials and then end up being supported by other workers in the courthouse, but they can always rely on the materials that have been provided to them through the Justice Center and the supports they have at the Justice Center to improve their outcomes in other domains, not just in our court, but in other courts as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your courage.